name is Shelley Thornton, and I'm a senior engineer with our permitting department, and I'm here to discuss some of our mitigation lands and ultimately our conservation lands. So we're going to start out with the Integrated Habitat Network. It was an initiative started by the Bureau of Mine and Reclamation in 1992. It was a district-wide concept to incorporate both the Central Florida Phosphate District as well as our conceptual reclamation plans. Our conceptual reclamation plans are plans that we put in place that show after we mine how the land is going to end up. It's very linear, and it primarily follows the floodplain of the Peace and Myaca River and their associated tributaries. It's based on aerials and topo mats and a very general 10,000-foot level. But the idea behind it is to improve the wildlife, provide downstream water quality, ecosystem benefits, and provide ultimately connectivity between the reclamation that we have proposed within our mine boundary and what's outside of our mine boundaries. So to kind of give you an overview here of what it looks like, I can work this, is this yellow here is the Central Florida Phosphate District boundary. The areas in gray are Mosaic holdings. Now, the lighter green areas out here is the Integrated Habitat Network. So that is what is put in place by the DEP. The areas in darker green are our preservation and reclamation wetlands. So as you can see, what we're trying to do is match up between those two areas at our project boundaries. To give you a little bit of a closer-up idea on it, this shows our South Pasture Mine, Ona, and our Wingate East. And this definitely tells a clearer picture as far as within our boundary, the green areas are our preservation, and immediately outside of that is that Integrated Habitat Network. So we're really trying to mesh reclamation with what's going on outside of our lands. So there are three types of lands that we have out there as far as conservation. We have preservation of higher quality wetland systems, streams, and uplands, and those areas are actually not mined. Then we have the establishment of wetland streams and uplands. Those are areas that are mined and then reclaimed. And then we have enhancement areas as part of our offsite mitigation projects. So Mosaic provides compensatory mitigation through on-site and off-site mitigation. Some of the on-site elements include reclamation to optimize the compensatory mitigation going back to the IHN network, which I was just discussing, the preservation and protection of lands that were not mined, the in-kind establishment, which goes back to the reclamation areas, and then the protection of established wetlands and streams. And all of these areas are put into perpetual conservation easements if they're required for mitigation. Another compensatory mitigation element are off-site mitigation projects, and this is a new concept put in place by the company, and it's associated with our new proposed mine applications, which are Ona, Wingate East, South Pasture, as well as DeSoto. So these are projects that are put in place, and the idea is to actually offset the wetland impacts before the mining occurs. So what that does is it actually reduces the temporal lag associated with mining. Mining is a rolling process. You mine a large block, you move on to reclamation, and then you go down the way that way. However, these off-site mitigation projects are actually tied to our proposed permits, which means as soon as those permits are approved, we can start construction on these off-site mitigation projects. They often involve larger, more ecologically valuable parcels. If I remember correctly, our 5 projects are over 2,000 acres in size. We employ rigorous scientific and technical analysis on this, and it's significant investment of resources. At times, we actually go out and buy the property fee simple. We actually pay for the construction, and then we're also on the hook for the long-term maintenance of those projects. Each of these projects will also be placed into those conservation easements. One of the things we wanted to make sure we employed with these projects is a watershed scale approach. One of the best watershed plans we have out there in the Peace River as well as the Myaca River watershed basins is the CHNEP CCMP. And it identifies 4 priority problems: water quality degradation, hydrologic alterations, fish and wildlife habitat loss, as well as stewardship gaps. So each of these off-site mitigation projects employ one or more of those techniques. And again, they're also put into conservation easements. So just as an example, these are some of the NEP's priority actions and the methods that we are employing in those projects. FW/H is the increase of acreage of land protected under a conservation easement. Then we have HAE, which is reestablish and maintain more natural seasonal flows. So what we've done is we've looked at all of these methods, all these priority actions, and tried to incorporate them into all of our projects. So I keep talking about these conservation easements. What exactly are they? Well, they are a voluntary legal agreement between a landowner and a land trust or a government agency. In our case, it's the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. They are the grantee of all of our conservation easements. And in some cases, depending on the mitigation that's required, the Army Corps of Engineers may have third-party beneficiary rights. It's legally binding, and it is held to the property whether or not it is sold or bought from somebody else. So the conservation easements is listed under the Florida Statutes 704.06, and it states to retain land or water areas in their existing natural vegetative state. It's to retain such areas for suitable habitat for fish, plants, and wildlife. And it's wetland, stream, and upland areas that are included in the area to be either preserved, enhanced, restored, or created. So it really covers every aspect of our property, whether or not it's a preservation area that's not mined, it's a reclamation area that's established, or if it's an enhancement as far as our offsite mitigation projects. All these properties that are included in the conservation easement boundary are required to follow the permit conditions for every single permit we have on that property. Listed in the conservations are some prohibited uses. Obviously, if you want to protect the land in perpetuity, you want to make sure it stays in that protected state, whether it be preserved before it's mined or after the case with the offsite mitigation projects, after it's constructed or enhanced. So it prohibits the construction or placing of buildings, roads, and signs, dumping or placing of soil or trash, the removal or destruction of trees, except for the removal of exotics and nuisance species. There's lots of land management that's also associated with these off-site mitigation projects. A lot of times, yes, we want to preserve it and leave it, but obviously land management is a critical factor in these. It also prohibits the excavation, dredging, or the removal of material substance that will affect the surface water of that. Surface uses include the water and the land area to remain. You want to make sure that the drainage stays in place, that there's nothing there to impede the flow. You want to make sure that if we have a hurricane that comes through, that we're able to go out and remove any debris that has fallen down. If there is a wildfire out there, that we're able to go in and provide fire breaks and make sure the property stays in its natural condition. As of July 1st, 2016 of this year, that Florida statute also included a provision that agricultural uses are allowed within a conservation easement if it is a current or historic use of the land, which includes silviculture, forestry management, and livestock grazing, as long as the activities are conducted in accordance with the 2008 Water Quality B&P manual that was authorized by the Florida Department of Agricultural and Consumer Services. So as I was saying, that there's three types. Land management is a very important tool associated with our conservation easements and really all of our land activities. Burn management, which is shown at the top there, is a critical tool for maintaining and promoting a viable ecosystem. In order to restore, enhance, and preserve the site's native vegetative communities, we want to make sure that they benefit the listed species and the gopher tortoises. And prescribe fire and mechanical treatment and herbicide treatments for the exotic and nuisance species. Again, this just goes to make sure that the land stays in the same state that it was. So kind of getting an idea to summarize, well, how much land are we actually talking about? We're at the Conservation Lands Workshop. Well, as far as our public parks that are located on formerly mined lands, we have approximately 16,000 acres that are located in some of our major counties. We have the Alafaya River State Park in Hillsborough County, Hardy Lakes Park in Hardy County, the Peace River Park Tenorock Fish and Management Area in Polk County, as well as Bunker Hill Park in Manatee County. So this is a summary of our conservation lands. Start up at the top, we're looking at granted, committed, and proposed. So the granted easement numbers are the ones that have been granted to the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. The committed ones are the ones that are actually identified in our permit applications. However, the mitigation is not complete, so they have not been conveyed yet into a conservation easement. The proposed acreages are the new numbers that are actually included in our proposed permit applications. So the offsite mitigation projects that I've been talking about include 4 of our mines. The Ona mine actually has 3 offsite mitigation projects. The first one is the Bay Swamp Enhancement Project, which is looking at lands on our own Mosaic property that exhibit the typical characteristics of a bay swamp forested wetland system. So we're looking at over 150 acres of forested wetland systems that are going to be planted in the ground. The Payne Creek Restoration Project is an old mined area that we're looking at and bringing to the historical conditions as far as the stream conditions. And the Bowlegs Creek property was actually mined in the 1980s and reclaimed. However, it was not reclaimed up to today's standards. So it's over 500 acres that will allow us to bring it up to today's standards, and includes the Marin Run stream that we have been able to reclaim a portion of it, and then it's right at the confluence of Bowlegs Creek and the Peace River. The DeSoto mine has an offsite mitigation project associated directly adjacent to it. The benefit of that is that we actually get to add on to our proposed preservation area onto 630 acres of additional 11 miles of Horse Creek that will be enhanced with that project. The Wingate East mine has what we call the Myakka River Headwaters Project, and it's approximately 2 miles of the Myakka River that are going to be able to restore that have just naturally been degraded due to lack of maintenance on those properties. And the South Pasture Extension Mine in Hardee County has 2 preservation areas, the Payne Creek Preservation Area and the Horse Creek Preservation Area. The offsite mitigation projects, summary, they have about 3,400 acres that are proposed for conservation easements. Included with that, with the total conservation lands up top, we have almost 47,000 acres that will be in conservation easements at the end of the day. Again, these conservation easements are placed into perpetuity. Mosaic is in charge of the land management and making sure that they stay in line with where they are at the time that that conservation easement is actually recorded. It is a public document.